Nail salons are gone.
What? Gone? All of them?
Yep,
What about the vending machines?
gone.
Jesus! Don't tell me laser tag.
Feds found it all, Saul.
Hey guys, Pete here. Last week I was left wondering, would Gene be able to have another taste of the scamming life and then walk away from it? Even though that didn't seem likely, it was possible, because there was a good chance we'd be revisiting the Breaking Bad timeline to learn where the return of Bryan Cranston and Aaron Paul would fit in. Jimmy McGill first appeared in their series in an episode titled Better Call Saul, so it's fitting they would show up in episode 11, which is titled Breaking Bad. I would say that their appearance lived up to the hype. They managed to include them in a way that was more about Jimmy. It was fantastic to revisit that space and to see these two great actors play off each other one more time. But after the dust settled, I was left with a careful what you wish for feeling. Not in that it wasn't an enjoyable episode, because it was great, but in the sense that there were so many payoffs I'd been waiting for that all sort of put a darker spin on things. For instance, I wanted to see more scenes with Mike. He did have a perfect ending in the Better Call Saul timeline with Papa Varga in episode 9, but it's Mike, so please find a way to bring him back as long as it's in service of Saul's story. Anyway, your 12:30 just walked in, and boom, more Mike. And as a bonus, it's during his sunglasses phase. Did I want his reappearance to be him giving Saul solid advice to avoid Walter White, only to have him completely disregard it? Not exactly. And we'll come back to the implications of that in a bit. Another thing I've been dying to know about since way back in season 4 was the phone call that Saul asked Francesca to answer on his birthday. Did I want that to be him calling to check on how things are in Albuquerque? In a word, no. I definitely did want this to mean that Kim was still alive and for them to have a chance to get back in touch with each other, but not in the way that it played out. There was a lot of important information in this conversation that I should mention though. Things did not cool off after Walter White died. Francesca is still being watched, and since Skylar White got her deal, that only leaves Saul and Jesse for the authorities to go after. Skylar getting a deal would indicate that the lottery ticket with the GPS coordinates that Walt gave her led them to discover Hank and Gomi's bodies. Francesca hearing that Jesse's car was found near the border means that Skinny Pete's plan to have Badger ditch his car near the border in El Camino worked. We also get updates on some of the characters Saul surrounded himself with. She doesn't know what happened to Kubi, Danny, aka Price, or Ira, but I'm happy to say that Huell finally made it out of that safe house. Because the DEA held him there under false pretenses, he walked, and is presumably back home in Louisiana. ADA Bill Oakley left the courthouse vending machines behind and became a defense attorney. And seeing his Saul-esque bus bench advertisements was a great way to explain visually that we were back in Albuquerque and some time had passed. The call turns out to be a wonderful send-off for Francesca that is made all the better by her hanging up before Gene says, "I guess this is goodbye." And the last big piece of information is that the only person who called her after it all went down was Kim. She asked if Jimmy was still alive, and he interprets this as, you mean there's a chance she might want to get back together, because he has his U-turn moment when he gets to a crossroads and decides to go back to call her. Apparently he knows where she works, or at least thinks he does. And just as he makes the call and asks for her, we're cut out of the conversation. From what we watched from across the street, it feels safe to say that making the call was a bad idea, but we'll have to wait to find out why that was. We do see his rageful reaction that involves smashing the receiver and kicking in the glass for good measure. Because this is so extreme, I think it only makes sense that he did talk to her. And as frustrating as it is not to know what was said, the effect it has on him is what really matters. After Kim left, we found out that he became Saul as a way to cope with everything that happened. We know Jimmy never dealt with Chuck's or Howard's deaths, and that he tries to forget about what happened with Kim by throwing himself into being the criminal lawyer Saul Goodman. After episode 609, that put a sad spin on the character's existence during Breaking Bad, but this episode makes things more complicated. I already mentioned him ignoring Mike's warning about Walt, and what that brought to mind was the switch in his office in the first episode of season 2. That made the point that when he gets something in his mind, he can't help himself, and they jump back and forth between the two timelines to really drive this idea home. In Omaha, he's reeling from whatever Kim told him on the phone, and so he heads back to Jeff's where he shows Marion how to watch funny cat videos on her new laptop. I thought the way Odenkirk played Gene here was really telling. He's laughing with her 1 minute, but gets deadly serious when he tells Jeff they should take their drinks outside. He needs to throw himself into this as fast as possible to drown out his thoughts of Kim. The scams start off feeling fun in the same way that Nippy was. He appears to pick marks that aren't nice people, and especially the first one feels like he might even have it coming to him. He uses the name Victor with a K, and it feels like he might be chasing some of what he got out of those early scams with Giselle. We see that he has things planned out. He has Jeff take the night shift and obtain some barbiturates. Gene finds guys he can befriend at bars while pretending to get drunk with them, and then have Jeff drug them with complimentary water on the way home. He uses a piece of tape to leave their doors unlocked so that Buddy can come in behind him and steal their identities while they're knocked out. They sell their information for a decent payday and then do it all again. In Albuquerque, it's been a few years since Kim left, so at this point he's just chasing a bigger high. After his post-kidnap conversation where he put it together that Walter is Heisenberg, he sees an opportunity. I suppose that some people might look at this as Saul being responsible for who Walter White will become, but I think that is missing the point of who Heisenberg was. We have two stories about two different journeys, so I look at this as it being what happens when they come together. And I've always thought of their transformations as being unique to each other, but at least at the end of this episode, they're looking a lot more similar. Because things do get dark quickly in Omaha as Gene starts to resemble Saul a lot more than Jimmy. He was already wearing the pinky ring, and he adds a Bluetooth headset and the back massager, and he starts sleeping with sex workers again. There's a moment when he realizes that one of his marks has cancer, where you think he might pump on the brakes, but it goes in the opposite direction. He gets a call and rushes over to Jeff's because Buddy couldn't go through with his part of the robbery. He noticed that their Mark took the same cancer meds his dad was taking and decides not to steal from him. Gene flips out and tries to convince him that he'll get over it, and when that doesn't work, he decides to do it himself. There's a great shot on the way to the house with Jeff looking at Gene in his rearview mirror, where you can see that he's really afraid of him at this point. It's a complete 180 from when he was first in his cab, and it underlines how quickly and completely that Gene went off the rails. Everything about this decision to go to the house is compulsive. It's been long enough that the barbiturates may no longer be working. Buddy removed the tape so he won't be able to walk right in. And when he breaks the window, that undermines the entire purpose of the scam. They were going to great lengths to make sure these guys wouldn't realize they'd been robbed. And as the episode comes to an end, we know that won't be the case this time. And as they've done throughout the episode, they cut back and forth between the two timelines. And there's a great parallel of him walking into Walt's high school here with what Gene does at the end of this episode. The decision to go to Walt and to tell him he has the right product, but not the right connections and strategy, and then offer to provide him those things. It was the beginning of the end for Saul Goodman. It makes this final decision to go after this other cancer man feel like it could be the end of Gene. So careful what you wish for. This episode gave us answers and the return of Walt and Jesse, but it made the Jimmy side winning the battle for his soul feel less likely. They were almost hitting us over the head with the similarities between the fall of Saul Goodman and the end of Gene Takavic. In both of those situations, he was making decisions and chasing after what he was wishing for, and we know what that's about now. And at least in the Breaking Bad timeline, we know how that worked out. I really liked how they managed the jumping back and forth, and the transition of the grave in the desert to him awake in the bed he made for himself in Omaha really sticks with you. There's an incredible amount of references, like the gas station where Francesca gets the call is the same one where Jesse gave the girl at the counter meth. And speaking of that, the whole find the rock shaped like New Jersey and follow the fishing line to the drain pipe was fun to watch. I don't know if I needed the answer to what happened to Huell, but I was happy when I got it. And I read in the Hollywood Reporter that Thomas Schnauz said that he named Price Daniel because he was hoping to make him the Danny from the laser tag, and they never got around to it. So he was excited to slip that in during the call and make it official. I also saw several posts that pointed out that he was pictured on one of the driver's licenses during the montage. As we become used to with this show, and I would say in his episodes in particular, it was a heavy episode with just the right amount of funny moments included to balance things out. There were so many things in the crystal ship. You had him asking if Oakley came out, the massage machine itself, and Mike's reaction to it. Francesca as a landlord, Marion with funny cat videos, and I'm not sure if it was supposed to be funny, but I did find Buddy's incredibly well-behaved dog to be a nice touch. It's not like this is a surprise, but I have to mention the performances. Watching Odenkirk play Saul and possibly showing us a new side of Gene after the phone call, it's wild how each one of these different versions of Jimmy comes across. Cranston and Paul, with the aid of some beanies, seem to slip right back into their roles. I think if I had to choose a favorite moment, it would be Jesse saying dick under his breath, but Walt's lecture about how they just need to let it cool down is right up there with it. The last thing I got that I really wanted was to see Gene and Kim reconnect. And I would have never guessed that it could lead to him putting himself on this path. Because we didn't hear what they said, and because we don't know what she's up to, I feel pretty confident that we're going to see this same conversation from her side in the next episode. She is working at a store that sells sprinklers, and it's titled Waterworks. Based on the timing, it's possible she just learned what he was up to with Walt. It stands out, though, that he thought he knew where she worked. He was able to call the operator and get in touch with her just like that. It's hard to say where we go in the timeline from here. It doesn't necessarily feel like we need to revisit anything with Walt and Jesse, although I wouldn't mind it. But him having this information makes it seem like it's at least possible that they got together at least once during the Breaking Bad timeline. What they said and whether that happened or if he just had someone go find her, all of that being a mystery, means that we really have no idea how she'd be feeling about him. As far as the way things were left after episode 609, it's safe to say that she still cares about him. She doesn't believe that they can be together, but she wouldn't want him to be suffering either. Considering she knows what he's been through and she knows him better than anyone else, she may understand what he's doing with this Saul Goodman persona. At the very least, she understands that him burying all these unresolved feelings about Chuck, about Howard, that none of that's good for him. But without knowing what she's facing in her own life, it's hard to imagine how those two things will influence each other if there's any chance that he turns things around. Because at the end of this episode, he looks set up to go down in a blaze of glory, similar to Mr. Walter White. I never envisioned that as an ending for him, so I'm interested to see if there's a way that he can resolve that, if he can move past that, and there's still 2 more full episodes to go to see if he does. And I think that is a great place to leave things. Let me know in the comments what you thought about the episode. I think Tom Schnauz went out on a high note. I wouldn't say that this episode topped Bad Choice Road or Plan and Execution, but I think that's more about where they fell in the story and what was going on than about anything he did in this particular episode. Next week, we're going to see the last episode directed by Vince Gilligan, and then one more that's written and directed by the showrunner Peter Gould. So let me know what you hope to see happen, how you think it might end, and what you definitely don't want to see. Please like this video if you enjoyed it. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And thanks for watching. I'll talk to you soon.